In a valley etched between two nations, a war was at a standstill, caught in a tense, breathless pause. Israel stood on one hill, their banners fluttering nervously in the wind. The Philistines stood on the other, a formidable line of soldiers, their shields gleaming under the sun. And between them, in the valley of Elah, lingered something heavier than any weapon: fear. Every day, the air grew thick with anticipation, but no one dared to break the silence. From the Philistine camp, a figure emerged, so immense he seemed to blot out the sun. His heavy footsteps shook the very ground, and a massive shadow stretched long and dark across the valley floor. This was Goliath of Gath. He was a giant, standing over 9 feet tall, a walking fortress of bronze and iron. His armor was like impenetrable walls, each piece reflecting the sharp morning light with a blinding glare. He carried a spear with a head that weighed more than most men's entire equipment. But it was his voice that was his greatest weapon, a roar that could silence an entire valley, a sound that seemed to crawl under your skin and plant seeds of pure terror. He would step forward, his immense frame a declaration of power, and his challenge would echo off the hillsides. "Choose a man to fight me," he'd bellow, his voice dripping with contempt. "If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Every morning and every evening, for 40 long days, he repeated this challenge. And every morning and every evening, the soldiers of Israel stood frozen. Fear had paralyzed an entire army. No one moved, no one spoke, no one volunteered. The heart of a nation had been captured by the shadow of one man. Far from the valley of fear, on a peaceful hillside bathed in the golden light of the sun, a young shepherd named David watched over his father's sheep. The world here was different. It was quiet, governed by the rhythm of the seasons and the needs of his flock. David wasn't a soldier. He wasn't tall or broad-shouldered. He hadn't been trained for the brutality of battle. His hands were skilled with a shepherd's staff and a simple sling, not a sword and shield. But David carried something into that valley that no one else had brought, a deep, unshakable confidence in his God. It was a faith forged in solitude, tested not against armies, but against the lion and the bear that threatened his sheep. He had learned that true strength didn't come from armor or a loud voice. His father, Jesse, sent him on a simple errand, to take food to his 3 older brothers who were serving in the army. So David walked into the Israelite camp, carrying roasted grain and loaves of bread, a boy on a family mission. But the moment he arrived, the atmosphere shifted. He felt the thick, suffocating blanket of dread that covered the camp. He saw soldiers huddled together, whispering about the giant. He saw the fear in their eyes, the way they flinched when Goliath's voice thundered across the valley once more. And then David heard it for himself. He heard the giant's taunts, the insults hurled not just at the army, but at the very God they served. As the words of defiance and mockery filled the air, something inside him rose up. It was a righteous anger, a holy indignation. He saw not a giant, but a blasphemer. He saw not an unbeatable foe, but a man defying the living God. And in that moment, David knew he couldn't stay quiet. He couldn't just stand by while fear held his people hostage. David began speaking to the soldiers around him, his voice a stark contrast to the whispers of fear. "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" His words, full of youthful zeal, were overheard and reported until they reached the ears of King Saul himself. Summoned to the royal tent, David stood before the king, a young man with dirt on his sandals and the sun on his skin. Saul looked at him, his expression a mixture of surprise and disbelief at the boy's age and slight build. But David's voice was calm and steady as he declared the unthinkable. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," he said. "Your servant will go and fight him." Saul was skeptical. You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David shared his own testimony, the stories from the lonely pastures. He told the king how he had defended his flock from both a lion and a bear, grabbing them by the hair and striking them down. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear," David concluded, "will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Convinced, or perhaps just desperate, Saul relented. He tried to equip David for the fight, dressing him in his own royal tunic, putting a coat of armor on him, and a bronze helmet on his head. But the armor was too heavy, too big, too unfamiliar. It wasn't made for him. It was a symbol of man's strength, and David's trust was elsewhere. After trying to walk around, he took it all off. Instead of a sword forged in fire, David picked up his familiar shepherd's staff and his simple sling. He walked down to a small, winding stream that trickled through the valley floor. There, he bent down and chose 5 smooth stones, worn by the water into perfect projectiles. 5 small stones against a giant. That was his arsenal. The valley fell silent. A hush descended over the thousands of soldiers watching from the hillsides. David began to walk alone into the open space between the 2 armies. On one side, the Philistine army watched in amusement, their laughter beginning to ripple through the ranks. On the other side, Israel's warriors held their breath, a nation's hope now resting on the shoulders of a shepherd boy. Goliath saw him coming. The giant's initial curiosity turned to booming laughter, a sound of pure disdain that rolled across the field. He was insulted. "Am I a dog?" he roared, his voice thick with scorn, "that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods, promising to feed his flesh to the birds and the wild animals. But David did not flinch. He did not waver. His voice, though not as loud as the giant's, carried a different kind of power, the power of conviction. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," David called back, his words clear and firm. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands." David didn't run away. He ran toward the giant. In a fluid, practiced motion, captured as if in slow motion, he reached into his shepherd's bag. His fingers closed around one of the smooth stones. He pulled it out and set it firmly in the leather pouch of his sling. The camera of our minds tracks the motion as he begins to spin the sling above his head. The whirring sound builds, a low hum growing into a sharp, slicing whistle cutting through the silent air. He was a blur of focused energy, a picture of absolute commitment. Then, with a final, powerful rotation, David released the sling. The stone shot forward, a small, dark projectile cutting a perfectly straight line through the air. It was aimed with a shepherd's precision, guided by a warrior's faith. The stone struck its target with incredible force. It hit Goliath squarely on his forehead, the only part of him not covered in bronze armor. The stone sank into his brow. For a moment, the giant's eyes widened in shock, and a final brief moment of comprehension. The taunts died on his lips. His massive body swayed, then crashed to the ground with a heavy, earth-shaking thud. The giant was dead. A collective gasp went through both armies, silence, then chaos. The Philistine soldiers, who had been laughing moments before, now stared in utter disbelief and horror. Their champion, their symbol of invincible power, was gone. Panic erupted in their ranks, and they turned and fled in a terrified retreat. On the opposite hill, the silence of the Israelite army broke into a thunderous roar of victory. They charged forward, cheering, pouring down into the valley they had feared for so long, chasing after their defeated enemies. That day, the battle was won. But it wasn't won by superior strength, by bigger armies, or by better weapons. It was won by the courage of one young man and his unyielding faith. David stood at the center of the valley, the wind blowing gently across the field where a giant had fallen. The story of that day would be told for thousands of years, a timeless reminder that with faith, courage, and purpose, no obstacle is insurmountable. David showed the world that no giant is too big, no challenge is too daunting when your trust is in something far greater and more powerful than yourself. Thanks for watching. We hope this story inspired you. If you enjoyed this cinematic retelling, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more animated Bible stories that bring these powerful lessons to life. We'll see you in the next video.